obligated in tefillah each and every day. On the other hand, the Ramban famously writes that in general the chiv tefillah is only at an eis tzara, but there is no daily obligation to daven, and the entire daily obligation to daven is a mitzvah midrabanan, which is zman grama. So the Ramban l'chora should say that women are patur from tefillah. However, the Ramban has a girsa, the Gemara in Brachos, which sorry about that. The Ramban has a Girsa in the Gemara in Brachos, which says that even though Eno Chinami they should be patur, but tefillah rachamim that tefillah is rachamim, and women require rachamim just like men require rachamim, and therefore women are obligated in tefillah to some degree, whatever that degree is, shavach, bakasha, moda'ani, whatever the degree of, or whether it's the actual Shemona Esrei, we're not going to get into that right now. But at the end of the day, women are chayiv in tefillah, so why would I assume Mussaf is any different? So Rabbi Akiva Eiger in two different places, in the Tshuva and Siman Tes, as well as in his Hagos and Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim, Siman Kuvav, quotes a Shalos Chuvos Besamim Rosh in Siman Pei Tes. The Chuvos Besamim Rosh, of course, was a very controversial sefer. It was written by Rav Shaul Berlin, but it was passed off as Chuvos of the Rosh. He claimed to have found manuscripts of Chuvos that were written by Rabbeinu Usher, none other than the Rosh himself, and it seems to have been a forgery. The Chassam Sofer was vehemently opposed to the Chuvos Besamim Rosh. He would refer to it as the Kizvei Harash, meaning as opposed to Kisvei, the Kizvei Harash, the lies of that it is from the Rosh. It's not from the Rosh. He writes in the Tshuva in Orach Chaim Siman Kufn and Daled. Many take the attitude that some of the Tshuvas may be legitimate, others are not, and even if they're all not legitimate, Rav Shaul Berlin himself was a Talmud Chacham, so maybe just assess each one whether it has merit or not. So anyway, in that Chuvas B'Sam Rosh, the Rabbi Akiva Eiger quotes in two different places. He writes, yes, tefillah rachamim inhu, and yes, women are chayiv in tefillah because it is rachamim, but that doesn't apply to carbon Mussaf, to Mussaf. Mussaf is connected to carbon Mussaf and has nothing to do with rachami. So when it comes to Mussaf, you only have the element of the carbon Mussaf. Now, where did carbon Mussaf come from? How did carbon Mussaf get paid for? Well, that was paid for from the, it was a carbonate tzibor. It was paid for from the funds of the tzibor that were collected when the Jewish people gave machzah shekel. So it says the B'Sam Rosh, women do not give machzah shekel. So if women do not give machzah shekel, they have no chelek in the carbonate tzibor. They have no chelek in the carbon Mussaf. And because the pasuk says ish kofer nafsho, we darshan ish v'lo isha, so they're not obligated in Mussaf, and therefore he says l'chara nira denashim peturus mitfilas Mussaf kivan denashim lo hayu shoklos, and the Tzlach raises the same possibility in his commentary on Maseches Brachos Daf Chav Vav. Now, Rav Yitzchak Elchanan in Chuvas Ber Yitzchak Orach Chaim Siman Chaf Anaf Gimel, as well as the Amudei Or, disagree, and they say, there are a lot of people that don't give machzah shekel. Anyone under the age of 20 doesn't give machzah shekel. You're going to tell me that from the age of bar mitzvah till 20 you shouldn't daven Mussaf? There are shitos that Kohanim didn't give machzah shekel. So you can tell me Kohanim shouldn't daven Mussaf, or at least be machmir that a Kohen shouldn't be a shliach tzibur for Mussaf, or someone between the age of 13 and 20 shouldn't be a shliach tzibur, because how could they be motzi you in something that they themselves may be patur from? No, they say when it comes to a carbon tzibur and a tefillah connected a carbon tzibur, we're not masaking the tefillah corresponding to those who contributed toward the carbon tzibur. We're masaking the tefillah corresponding to anyone who achieves kapara through that carbon, anyone who's part of the tzibur and gets a kapara through that carbon, and certainly people under the age of 20 and women and kohanim are all part of the tzibur, and therefore they're all obligated in the tefillah. In the Chuvas Lahoros Nasan, Chelik Gimel Siman Yudalid, Rav Nasan Gestetner points out that perhaps the reason women daven Mussaf is based on the Mishnah in Shkalim, Perek Aleph Mishnah Hey, that it says that if women offer Shkalim, then we do accept it from them. So they do have some chelik in the Karbanos Tzibur. But he then points out that if you look in the Bartanura over there, the Bartanura says that the women should fully give the money to the Tzibur so that the matbeos become batel to the other matbeos that have been collected. And it would turn out that they don't really have a chelik in the Tzibur because the matbeos become batel in the other matbeos, and that's the only reason it could be used. Now, generally speaking, Rav Nasan Gestetner points out the Gemara Me'ilah Daf Chafalav tells us matbeos cannot become batel, but the Avnei Miluim writes in Siman Chav Ches that that's only true of matbeos of Chulin, but matbeos of Kodesh can be. But then Rav Nasan Gestetner says that even so, Even so, it seems that as long as you can accept shkalim from women, then women can participate in the Tefilas Mussaf. He brings a raya from a Tosfos and Maseches Yoma that both those who are obligated and those who are not obligated to give have the same connection to the carbon that comes as a result. So that is one line of thinking, that maybe women are pater because they do not participate in the Machzah Shekel. Then the Tzlach says, well, wait just a second. If women are pater, so they don't have to daven Mussaf, but even so, is there anything lost? Is there any problem with a woman davening Mussaf? Even if she is pater, even if you were to accept this argument of the Besamim Rosh? So the Tzlach says, well, it would seem to depend whether it's an Ashkenazi woman or a Sephardi woman. That we know that Ashkenazi women are allowed to say and are encouraged to recite brachos and mitzvah shazman grama when they volunteer to do a mitzvah like Netilas Lulav, like Tekiah Shofar. So they do say a bracha. Whereas Sephardi women do not recite a bracha and mitzvah shazman grama. So even if women are pater from carbon Mussaf, so they're pater from Tefilas Mussaf, but they should for an Ashkenazi woman there would be nothing wrong with reciting the bracha. Comes along the Maram Shik in Orach Chaim Siman Sadi, and he points out that not so simple. He points out that the Ramah writes in Hilchos Havdalah in Siman Reish Sadi Vav Sif Aleph that Nashim cannot say Havdalah for themselves, and Magen Avraham explains that the reason that they can't, even though Ashkenazim hold that women are allowed to volunteer mitzvah shazman grama, so allowed to volunteer a bracha on mitzvah shazman grama. So even if women are pater from Havdalah, why can't they say Havdalah for themselves? So Magen Avraham explains, because any mitzvah that is a mitzvah shazman grama, a woman who's going to do that mitzvah can then say the bracha on the mitzvah. But when the mitzvah is the bracha, it's not that there's a mitzvah and a bracha on it. The mitzvah is the bracha. Then even Ashkenazi women are not allowed to volunteer. So the Maram Shik says, if women are pater from Mussaf, it could be they're usher to daven Mussaf. It would be like saying Havdalah, where they're not allowed to volunteer. And that's why women don't recite Kiddush Levana. The bracha is the mitzvah. So if the bracha is the mitzvah, then they don't volunteer such a mitzvah. Now, that goes in two directions. So the Maram Shik says, based on that women should not daven Mussaf, even Ashkenazi women shouldn't daven Mussaf, because the brachos of the tefillah are the very mitzvah, and therefore it's not a separate asiyah, and women are excluded from that. The tzlach goes in the exact opposite direction. The tzlach says, no, even Sephardi women can daven Mussaf. What's the whole reason you don't say a bracha on a mitzvah shazman grama, that Sephardim don't say a bracha on mitzvah shazman grama? It's because the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tzitzis Perek Gimel Halacha Tes, which is the sheet of the Mechaber, that the Mechaber Pasuk like the Rambam, that they don't say a bracha because you can't say Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvos of Vitzivanu. So if you're not commanded, it's sheker to say Vitzivanu. But if the nusach of the bracha has no vitzivanu in it, then there would be no problem whatsoever. And the tzlach just doesn't connect to this whole discussion about Havdalah and when the mitzvah is the bracha and everything like that. Likely because the mitzvah is not really the bracha, the mitzvah is really the karban, and we just say the tefillah corresponding to the karban. Now, so you always hear people talk about this, about women and bar mitzvah bachrim davening Mussaf. How do we paskin halacha l'maisa? Are women allowed to daven Mussaf? Are they encouraged to daven Mussaf? So Pashtus is that they do, and we don't pass like the Besamim Rosh, and we say like Rav Yitzchak Elchanan and others who say that there's no problem with the woman davening Mussaf. However, notably, Rav Avad Yosef in Yabio Omer Chelik Beis Orach Chaim Siman Vav writes, Al Kain min hara'oi sha'anashim yavo lebeis haknesses v'yishma'u tfilas Mussaf min hashas v'yetzu yidei chavasam l'kulei alma. That better than a woman davening Mussaf is just listen to the Shliach Tzibur and be yotzei in that way. But they should not, says Rav Avad Yosef, daven Mussaf. However, he says, I saw in the Sarus Tshuva that Nashim are chayavos in Mussaf of Rosh Hashanah. That Rosh Hashanah is different, because even though Tefilas Mussaf is not Rachmininu, Mussaf of Rosh Hashanah is certainly Rachmi. And therefore, women are going to be obligated to Tefilas Mussaf of Rosh Hashanah. In Shuvas Minchas Yitzchak Chel Gimel Siman Aleph, he quotes from the Rogatchover, don't need the Rogachover for this. It's a fairly famous idea. Certainly in our yeshiva of Soloveitchik has it in a number of contexts that there's a big difference between people who contribute something and chip in and buy something together, where you have a karban hashutfim versus a karban hatzibur, and therefore, just because women do not contribute to the machzah shekel, so if the shkalim were all about shutfim joining together to buy something together, then the people who don't participate. But it's a karban hatzibur. It takes on its whole new different identity once it's the entire tzibur participating, and women are in fact included in that tzibur. And I think that's why standard psak is we generally assume that women do recite Tefilas Mussaf, that they're certainly permitted to daven Mussaf. Okay, have a great day, everyone.